If you want to hear my theory about how Ellie Creed from Pet Sematary, as well as 2 other characters in that story, have the same ability as Danny Torrance from The Shining, then stick around to the end of this video. Stephen King's 3rd full-length novel, The Shining, is titled after an ability held by a few of the characters. The man to introduce us to the ability says that he and his grandmother used to call it the Shine. It can be described as a psychic and clairvoyant power whose intensity varies from individual to individual. Dick Halloran is the name of the head chef at the Overlook Hotel who teaches Danny everything he knows about the Shine. He explains that he and his grandmother used to have entire conversations without ever opening their mouths.
She called it shining. And for a long time, I thought it was just the 2 of us that had the shine to us.
But it's not. Halloran explains that there aren't a lot of people who shine, but he's run across maybe 50 or 60 who have a little bit of shine to them. So what does shining actually consist of, and why do I think that Ellie from Pet Sematary has the shine? As Dick mentioned, those who shine are capable of telepathic communication. Danny is also able to hear the thoughts of those who don't shine, like how he hears Mrs. Brandt's thoughts about the hotel's valet, Mike. No, I'm not gonna say what those thoughts consisted of, but... When Halloran asks Danny if he listens to his parents' thoughts, he says that he tries not to invade their privacy, but he can't help picking up on their feelings or emotions. There is evidence of Ellie reading her father's mind, or at the very least, picking up on his feelings in Pet Sematary. The family goes to visit Ellie's grandma and grandpa on her mother's side, but Lewis doesn't go with. Lewis strongly dislikes his father-in-law because he tried to bribe Lewis out of marrying Rachel, making him quite possibly the champion of stereotypical in-law characters in fiction. Ellie somehow seems to know the real reason and asks her father if he's pissed off at grandpa, to which Lewis wonders how she possibly could have known that. Halloran also warns Danny about some bad dreams that he's had at the Overlook. He tells him people who shine can sometimes see things that are gonna happen, and I think they can sometimes see things that did happen. When Ellie is away at her grandparents' house, she has a dream of her cat, Church, dying the night that Church is run over by a truck and buried in the Micmac burial ground.
I dreamed he got hit by a car and you and Mr. Crandall buried him in the Pet Sematary.
That was a silly dream, wasn't it?
But it wasn't too silly of a dream, and Ellie continues to have dreams about past and future events. But if you don't want to get the ending of Pet Sematary spoiled for you, I would not watch any more of this video. Why don't you check out this one instead? Those of you who have read the book may remember that Ellie's next dream involves Lewis being dead, a prediction of the end of Pet Sematary. And when Ellie and Rachel are about to leave on the plane, Ellie begs her father to let them stay, or for him to come with. And I think this is because she senses her father's life will be in danger. She also expresses more of her fears to Lewis at the airport. Daddy, I dreamed that we were at Gage's funeral, and the funeral man opened his coffin and it was empty. Then I dreamed I was home, and I looked at Gage's crib, and that was empty too, but there was dirt in it. This is just before Lewis goes to dig up Gage and try to revive him in the Micmac burial ground. The first dream represents the fact that Lewis will empty Gage's coffin in the Pleasant View Cemetery, and the second one is a reminder of when the ghost of Victor Pascow tried to warn Lewis in the night not to go to the cursed burial ground, and Lewis wakes up with the dirt of the Pet Sematary path on his feet in bed the next morning. Just before boarding the plane, Ellie begs one last time. Listen to this portion. Ellie gazed at him solemnly with her Sybil's eye. I don't want to go, she said again, but so low that only Lewis could really hear over the shuffle and murmur of the boarding passengers. I don't want Mommy to go either. Ellie, come on, Lewis said. You'll be fine. I'll be fine, she said, but what about you? Daddy, what about you? I find it very interesting that King describes Ellie's gaze as having come through Sybil's eyes, a word derived from the Greek word Sibylla, which described a woman who utters the oracles and prophecies of a god. Shortly after, Ellie has another vision on the plane where she describes Gage coming alive again and wielding a knife. What happens next is interesting if you think about another aspect of the Shine that Dick Halloran describes to Danny. He asks Danny to contact him if there's any trouble at the Overlook, that he might even hear his call all the way down in Florida. Danny later does use this to call for help, sending Halloran on his way to try to rescue the Torrance family. Personally, I probably would have just let the little die. I mean, it's so much colder in Colorado than it is in Florida. Why would you leave? Something similar happens in Pet Sematary. However, instead of the child calling out for help, it is the ghost of Victor Pascow who contacts Ellie in her dream and takes her to the Pet Sematary in an attempt to try to get her to tell Rachel what she had seen. It's possible that this isn't an example of a long-distance call using The Shining though, because maybe Pascow is just able to travel anywhere because he's a ghost. This does send Rachel on her way to try to put a stop to Lewis's actions. However, it seems unlikely she would randomly take the word of a 6-year-old based on a bad dream that she had. This is why I think Rachel has a little bit of shine to her as well. In fact, Halloran did mention that he thinks all mothers shine a little, at least until their kids grow up up enough to watch out for themselves. This would also explain why Pascal was able to help Rachel throughout the latter part of the story. But there's one more character that I think has a tiny bit of shine as well. When Rachel's on her way home from Chicago, she phones Judd Crandall to see if he knows why Lewis isn't home. When speaking to her, he mentions that she sounds closer. Although she did sound closer somehow, he hears the sound of the wind on the line, and it reminds him of the sound of dead voices singing in chorus. I don't think Judd or Rachel realize that they have the shine, but if he does have some faint sign of it, it would explain how he senses that Lewis was getting ideas about burying Gage in the Micmac grounds.
You're thinking of putting him up there. Don't deny the thought hadn't crossed your mind, Lewis.
There is one more major aspect of the shine, though, that leads me to believe that Ellie has a pretty strong case of it. When Halloran is trying to gauge how strong Danny's shine is, he asks him to blast a thought as hard as he can. Danny is much more powerful than anticipated, though. Halloran flies back in his seat, and he's injured by the force of Danny's shine, which he compares to a Nolan Ryan fastball. Well, Ellie may be channeling a little bit of Fergie Jenkins herself, because after Rachel leaves to go back to Ludlow, her father phones Lewis about a dream Ellie had that is so powerful that they end up taking her to the hospital. Let me know in the comments if you can come up with any other Stephen King characters who have the shine, and watch this video if you want to hear some of the things that you might have missed in Stephen King's It. Remember to subscribe to CZsWorld for new horrors every week, ring that death bell for notifications, and I'll see you in the next one, assuming we both survive.